Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today, we'll talk about the storylines from the Harry Potter books that never made it into the films. Moments that could have added depth, emotion, and dramatic power. If only they'd been given a chance to shine on screen. Sit back, enjoy the episode, and let a little magic into your day. Enjoy the video. Number 1. The Marauders and their journey to Animagi. The early films followed the books closely, but starting with The Prisoner of Azkaban, the narrative began to mature and the characters faced more complex moral challenges. That's when the movies began sacrificing important story arcs for the sake of pacing. One such casualty was the full story of the Marauders: James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Viewers were never told that the mysterious nicknames on the Marauders' map, Prongs, Padfoot, Moony, and Wormtail, belonged to them. Nor did the films explain how Harry's father and his friends became Animagi, not for amusement, but out of loyalty. They wanted to be there for Remus when he transformed into a werewolf and risked mastering the complex magic of transformation to do so. Number 2, Hermione and her fight for house elf rights. Hermione is a character defined by her strong moral compass and deep sense of justice. Her Muggle-born background gave her a critical perspective on the wizarding world and helped her see injustices others had long accepted. This led to the creation of the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, an initiative Hermione launched to advocate for the rights of house elves, whom the magical community viewed as naturally enslaved. The films made no mention of this arc, even though it revealed one of Hermione's most powerful traits, her empathy, not just for her friends, but for the most overlooked and vulnerable. Number 3, The Secret of Rita Skeeter. In the films, Rita Skeeter is simply an annoying journalist with a taste for gossip, but in the books, she's far more dangerous. Harry and his friends couldn't figure out how she always knew their private conversations, until Hermione uncovered the disturbing truth. Rita was an unregistered animagus. She could transform into a beetle and sneak into restricted areas to eavesdrop. Hermione not only solved the mystery, she trapped Skeeter in a jar and held her captive, threatening to expose her unless she stopped publishing lies. This moment showed Hermione in a new light, not just as a clever student, but as a brilliant strategist unafraid to stand up to adult wizards. Number 4, Voldemort's origin and a love that wasn't. One of the most profound elements of the Half-Blood Prince is the sequence of memories Dumbledore shares with Harry. These aren't just tools for understanding the enemy. They reflect larger themes of fate, choice, and the pain of human history. Harry learns that Voldemort was born from deceit. His mother, Marietta Edgecombe, came from a once noble but degenerate magical family. She fell in love with a muggle, Tom Riddle, and used a love potion to make him marry her. When the potion's effects wore off, he left, unaware she was pregnant. This detail is deeply symbolic. Tom Riddle, Jr. was conceived without love, and perhaps that's why he never learned to love. The films barely touched on this haunting origin, though it offers powerful insight into Voldemort's inability to connect, his obsession with immortality, and his descent into darkness. Number 5, the relationship between Lupin and Tonks. In the films, their love appears suddenly without context, but in the books it's a journey, full of hesitation, inner conflict, and emotional wounds. Remus Lupin, despite his bravery, believed he was unworthy of love because of his condition, being a werewolf. He tried to walk away from Tonks even after learning she was pregnant, and attempted to join Harry on his mission. Dumbledore once said that fear takes many forms, and Lupin's story proves it. Only after a raw, heartfelt conversation with Harry did Lupin realize that running from love was its own form of cowardice. Number 6, The Dursleys' Farewell and Dudley's Redemption. Dudley Dursley stood awkwardly in the doorway. No insults, no smirk, just silence. Then he did something Harry never expected. "I don't think you're a waste of space," he said. It wasn't much, but coming from Dudley, it was everything. This moment in Deathly Hallows showed a shift. a quiet apology. A boy raised on cruelty trying, in his own way, to say thank you. He remembered the Dementor attack. He knew Harry had saved his life. And now, as they parted, he didn't want to leave without saying something real. The films cut this scene. The Dursleys vanished without a word. No closure, no complexity. But in the book, Dudley's goodbye revealed a crack in the armour, a hint that behind the bullying, behind Vernon's fury and Petunia's fear, there was still something human. It didn't erase the past, but it made it more honest, more true. That simple sentence wasn't about forgiveness, it was about growth, and Harry deserved to hear it. Number 7, the fate of Neville, Longbottom's parents. Neville Longbottom wasn't just a shy boy who lost his toad, he was the son of heroes. Frank and Alice Longbottom, both respected Aurors, both members of the original Order of the Phoenix. After Voldemort's fall, they were captured by Bellatrix Lestrange, Rodolphus Lestrange, Rabastan Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. They were tortured with the Cruciatus curse until their minds broke. In Order of the Phoenix, Neville visits them at St. Mungo's. They don't recognize him. His mother silently hands him a chewing gum wrapper. He pockets it like treasure. "She gives me those," he says quietly. "I think she knows who I am, in her own way." The films never showed this, never showed the heartbreak in Neville's eyes, the quiet courage it took to walk those halls, to stand tall without glory or prophecy. His parents weren't dead, but they were gone, and he lived every day with that shadow. That pain forged him, made his bravery mean something more. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was the kind of strength that never asks for attention, but never breaks. Number 8. The prophecy and Neville's possible destiny. The prophecy said one thing. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. But it didn't say who. It could have been Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom. Both boys were born in July, both to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times, both marked by fate. But it was Voldemort who chose. He saw more of himself in Harry, half-blood, orphan-to-be. He saw threat, and so he marked the boy who would become his downfall. That choice sealed everything. "It means me?" Harry asks Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix. The prophecy could have been about Neville? Yes, it could have, if Voldemort had gone to the Longbottoms first. If he had tried to kill Neville, the entire story might have turned. Harry would have been another casualty, another name in the newspaper, and Neville would have been the one with the lightning scar. But Neville didn't get the scar. He got something worse. He grew up visiting his parents in St. Mungo's, Frank and Alice Longbottom, 2 great Aurors, tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. He saw them blank and broken, held their hands, smiled for them when they couldn't remember his name. His pain was quiet, constant, not wrapped in prophecy, but just as deep. The films never gave this weight. They never showed the flicker of destiny that hung between 2 boys, never let us see how one man's fear shaped another child's future. But the books did. They let us feel the tension between fate and free will, between prophecy and choice. Neville wasn't the chosen one, but he still rose, still fought, still led, because in the end, it wasn't the prophecy that made Harry a hero, it was his choices, and Neville made them too. Number 9, Percy Weasley's betrayal and return. Percy Weasley slammed the door on his family. He chose the ministry, chose ambition, chose to believe the official line that Voldemort had not returned, even when his parents and brothers knew otherwise. He walked away from the burrow, from Molly's tears, from Arthur's silence, from Fred and George's furious laughter. Percy wouldn't recognize a joke if it danced naked in front of him wearing Dobby's tea cozy, Fred once joked. But the truth wasn't funny. Percy was gone. For most of the final books he stayed gone. Cold letters, no Christmas visits, just silence. Then in Deathly Hallows, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Percy appeared. Out of breath, covered in dust. He didn't beg forgiveness. He joined the fight. Side by side with Fred, they fought like they never had before. Brothers, not enemies. And Percy, for a moment, laughed, truly laughed, Then the world shattered. Fred Weasley died with a smile still frozen on his face. The explosion took him mid-laugh. Percy dropped to his knees beside his brother and refused to move. "No," he screamed. "Not my brother, not him." For pages he wouldn't leave Fred's body. He kept fighting, but never far from the spot. His grief was raw, immediate, human. The price of pride had come due, and Percy paid it in full. The films never gave us this. No return, no redemption, no grief. Percy stood in the background, forgotten. But in the books his story mattered. It showed that even the most stubborn can find their way home, and that sometimes it's not too late until it is. Percy's arc wasn't about being right. It was about being brave enough to admit you were wrong. Number 10. Peter Pettigrew's debt to Harry. In the cellar of Malfoy Manor, Peter Pettigrew raised his wand. Harry Potter was helpless. Ron too, they were cornered. And yet Pettigrew hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. He had remembered something, a moment from years ago in the Shrieking Shack when Harry had stopped Sirius and Remus from killing him. "He's in your debt," Harry had said then, and Peter had listened. That moment came back now when it mattered most. His hand trembled, his wand lowered slightly. He didn't speak, but everything in his face, fear, confusion, guilt, showed a man at war with himself. Harry saw it. "You're going to kill me?" he asked quietly. "After I saved your life?" The words landed like a curse. Pettigrew flinched. He didn't want to do it. He couldn't. Then it happened. The silver hand, gifted to him by Lord Voldemort, tightened around his own throat. It turned against him, cold, merciless. It felt the weakness in his heart and crushed it. He died, gasping, not from a curse, but from the punishment built into loyalty that was never truly his. The magic didn't forgive. It wasn't moved by doubt. It saw betrayal in hesitation and struck. The films erased this scene. Pettigrew simply disappeared, an empty character with no reckoning. But the books gave him a twisted, perfect end, not redemption, not heroism, just a flicker of humanity and then justice, delivered by the very dark lord he had worshipped. It was a moment that reminded us even the worst cowards carry the burden of choice. And sometimes, choice is what kills them. Number 11. The Tragedy of Ariana Dumbledore. It happened in a small room, behind closed doors, with 3 young men and 1 broken girl. Ariana Dumbledore, fragile, damaged by an attack from Muggle boys in childhood, couldn't control her magic. She needed safety, care, quiet. But that day there was shouting, anger, spells. Albus Dumbledore, Aberforth Dumbledore, Gellert, Grindelwald, 3 wands raised. One of them struck Ariana. She fell, and no one ever knew whose curse had killed her. Aberforth never forgave Albus. He punched him at her funeral. He said it plainly in Deathly Hallows. You sacrificed her for your ambition. And Albus never denied it, because deep down he feared it was true. I was gifted. I was brilliant. I was selfish, Dumbledore later confessed to Harry. I wanted to prove myself to Gellert, to the world, and she paid the price. That tragedy haunted him. It bled into every choice he made, every secret he kept. The films gave us a wise, composed Dumbledore, a man always in control, but the books revealed something deeper. A man with cracks, with guilt, with regrets so heavy they shaped his life. He turned down power. He avoided confrontation with Grindelwald for decades. He raised Harry like a soldier, yet feared the boy would follow the same path he once did. Every whisper in the shadows, every withheld truth, it was Ariana's ghost guiding his hand. This story wasn't about a duel, it was about a burden. About how one moment of pride can ruin everything you love. Had the films shown that night, the shouting, the spell, the silence, it would have changed how we see Dumbledore forever, not just as a mentor, but as a man trying to redeem himself through the boy he sent to war. Number 12. Fleur Delacour and the Weasley family conflict. When Bill Weasley was mauled by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, he was left with deep scars across his face. Mrs. Weasley was devastated, not only by the injury, but by what it might mean for Bill's future. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, she quietly wondered whether Fleur Delacour would still want to marry her son now that he no longer looked the same. The Weasley matriarch didn't say it outright, but the doubt was there, heavy and sharp. Fleur heard those whispers, and she responded with fire. "What do I care how he looks?" she said fiercely, standing her ground before the entire Weasley family. "I'm good-looking enough for both of us, I think." Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't offended because her pride was wounded. She was hurt because no one believed in the depth of her love. That scene in the book turned Fleur from a background beauty into someone powerful, proud, and painfully human. Before that moment, many characters and even readers saw Fleur mostly through a narrow lens. She was the glamorous girl from Beauxbatons, the Triwizard champion with Veela charm, the one who made Ron stammer and Ginny roll her eyes. But standing beside Bill, scarred and strong, Fleur proved she wasn't there for fairy tales. She was there for loyalty, for love that didn't fade with beauty, for everything Molly Weasley thought her son might never have again. The films cut this story entirely. Fleur remained the distant, pretty bride, introduced briefly and never given time to grow. But the books gave her space to be bold, to fight for her love, to stare Molly in the eye and defend her heart. In that single, unforgettable moment, Fleur Delacour stopped being a side character and became a woman worth remembering. Number 13, the full set of Trials Before the Philosopher's Stone. In the hidden depths beneath Hogwarts, far from the enchanted ceilings and torchlit corridors, lay one of the most elaborate magical defenses ever created within the school. Designed to protect an object of unimaginable power, the Philosopher's Stone, these trials were the product of the finest magical minds of Hogwarts faculty. Each test was not only a barrier, but a reflection of the professor who had conjured it. And while the movie adaptation brushed over many of these challenges, the book reveals a labyrinth of trials that demanded courage, intelligence, loyalty, and above all, unity. The enchantments began the moment one crossed the threshold through the trapdoor, guarded by Fluffy, the colossal three-headed dog bred and enchanted by Rubeus Hagrid. Music lulled the beast into sleep, a clever nod to Hagrid's simpler but effective magical understanding. But beyond Fluffy, the trials were not merely physical. They tested every aspect of a wizard's training and character. The real brilliance of this protection wasn't in brute force, but in the layered complexity and the need for multiple types of magical expertise. The descent through the trapdoor landed the trio, Harry, Hermione, and Ron, into a mass of writhing devil's snare. This magical plant, designed by Professor Sprout, the herbology teacher, represented more than just a lesson in plant-based defense. It was a trap of fear. The more one struggled, the tighter it squeezed, and only calm, rational thinking could counteract it. "Stop moving," Hermione instructed in the book, revealing her understanding of the plant's behavior. But even that wasn't enough. Light and warmth were the true antidotes. A quick burst of the Lumos Solum spell, a piece of spellwork Hermione had mastered, illuminated her intelligence and calm under pressure. It was a lesson in not panicking, something that a typical 11-year-old might easily fail. In the film, this was the first true obstacle shown, but in Rowling's original text, it was merely the beginning. The following chamber revealed a battalion of enchanted flying keys. Professor Flitwick, Master of Charms, had orchestrated this trial. Hundreds of keys zoomed about in all directions, their silvery wings flickering in the torchlight. Only one would fit the heavy, ancient door. But finding it wasn't enough, it had to be caught mid-air. Harry's skill as a seeker came to the forefront here. He mounted a broomstick, surveyed the erratic flight patterns, and lunged after the correct key. The movie retained this scene, but it minimized the layered meaning. It wasn't just about catching a key, it was about recognizing one's strengths and trusting instincts. Past the key room awaited a chessboard of life-sized stone warriors. The sheer presence of this chamber was foreboding. Each piece towered over the children, carved in cold, silent marble. This was Professor McGonagall's doing, a masterstroke of transfiguration and strategy. Here, the challenge was not just magical, but intellectual and sacrificial. Ron, whose quiet brilliance in chess had been dismissed by many, took command. He did not hesitate. Every move was calculated, and when the time came, he sacrificed himself to clear the path forward. "That's chess," he said in the book. This moment was a testament to his courage, to the idea that being a hero sometimes means stepping back so others can advance. The movie retained this part, but did not dwell on the emotional weight of Ron's sacrifice. The film then jumps almost directly to Harry confronting Quirrell. Yet in the book, the trials continued. One of the most intriguing and cerebral tests was designed by Professor Snape, often maligned, rarely understood. It was this trial that brought out Hermione's brilliance in its purest form. 7 potions stood on a table in the next room, each in an unmarked bottle. Some contained poison, others would help them move forward, and one would return them to safety. A riddle, carved on parchment, was their only guide. This wasn't a challenge of magical strength, it was logic, pure and simple. As Rowling wrote, this kind of thing was Hermione's cup of tea. Indeed, she deduced the correct sequence, identifying which potion allowed Harry to proceed and which allowed her to return and help Ron. Snape's riddle reminded the reader that in a world of magic, the sharpness of mind remained the greatest weapon. This trial was entirely omitted from the movie. It was a regrettable exclusion, for it revealed a layer of depth in both the story and its characters. Snape, often portrayed as vindictive and cruel, was here shown as an intellectual, demanding reason over reaction. Hermione, often seen as bossy or overly bookish, demonstrated the grace of true intellect. The challenge was silent, cold, and mentally brutal. It left no room for error, no second chances, and no wand-waving. Another test, absent from the movie, was the encounter with a fully grown mountain troll. While this chamber was referenced in the book, stating that it had already been knocked out, presumably by Quirrell, the implication was clear. Professor Quirrell, though outwardly timid, had prepared a test that relied on brute strength and danger. In the greater narrative, it also served as a callback to the Halloween scene earlier in the book, when the trio had faced a troll together and learned to trust one another. This offhand reference suggests that, had they arrived earlier, they might have had to face the troll again, perhaps even more dangerous this time. The diversity of the trials spoke volumes about the personalities of the professors who designed them, Hagrid's love of magical creatures, Sprout's deep knowledge of flora, Flitwick's charm work precision, McGonagall's strategic brilliance, Snape's affinity for riddles and potions, Quirrell's deceptive danger, all culminated in an elaborate puzzle that no single person could solve alone. It was teamwork, trust, and individual strength that allowed Harry, Hermione, and Ron to advance. Each step revealed something critical about their character and prepared Harry for the confrontation that lay ahead. Number 14, Marietta Edgecombe's betrayal of Dumbledore's army. The room was quiet, cloaked in a heavy silence that had nothing to do with magic. Inside the hidden walls of the Room of Requirement, a space that once echoed with laughter, spellwork, and the promise of resistance, now stood a ghost of itself. The betrayal had not yet unfolded, but its shadow was already gathering, one that would stain trust, divide friendships, serve as a harsh reminder of the risks involved in defying authority. Marietta Edgecombe, a name absent from the films but etched into the fabric of the books, was more than just a minor character. She was the embodiment of hesitation, fear, and the kind of quiet loyalty that can shift like sand when power presses too hard. Best known as the friend of Cho Chang, Marietta was drawn reluctantly into Dumbledore's army, not out of conviction, but out of friendship. She attended a few meetings, always hanging back, eyes flickering nervously, her voice never quite joining in the enthusiasm that filled the room. Her presence was tolerated because of Cho, but her silence, her discomfort, and her carefully measured steps should have been a warning. While others embraced the thrill of rebellion against the ministry, Marietta remained tethered to the real world, the one where her mother worked at the Fleur network office, directly under the eye of the corrupt and menacing Dolores Umbridge. The fear of consequence gnawed at her like a slow poison. When Professor Umbridge's hunt for subversive behavior intensified, she needed someone from within. The pressure on Marietta became unbearable. In the book, Order of the Phoenix, we learn that Marietta edged into the room, her eyes flickering, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked deeply uncomfortable. The signs were there. The weight of fear does not often make a dramatic entrance. It arrives in quiet glances, in unspoken dread. Despite her reluctance, Marietta did attend meetings. She witnessed Harry's impassioned explanations about what Voldemort was truly doing, listened to the training sessions, and saw firsthand the conviction of her classmates. But unlike others, Marietta did not have the emotional armor to resist authority. The weight of her mother's job, of family reputation, of fear, all of it was too much. And so she spoke. But she did not anticipate the cost. Hermione Granger, ever the strategist, had planned for exactly this type of betrayal. Long before the first meeting of Dumbledore's army, she had enchanted the parchment used to sign the members' names. To the untrained eye, it was a simple list, but to those who understood the depth of Hermione's brilliance and cautious nature, it was a silent contract, a magical one. The text in Order of the Phoenix makes it clear. You might have noticed, Hermione said smugly, that she left the meeting the moment we started talking about serious stuff. I had a feeling she might not be trustworthy, so I put a little jinx on the list of names. When she betrayed us, well, let's just say it showed. It did more than show. The word sneak erupted across Marietta's face in vivid, inflamed boils, an inescapable mark of her betrayal. No charm could remove it. Madame Pomfrey tried, but the jinx was locked in with Hermione's precision and iron will. The movies erased this moment entirely, brushing Marietta under the cinematic rug, choosing instead to merge her role with Cho's, making Cho seem like the one who betrayed the army under Veritaserum. But that change diluted the moral complexity and power of the original story. Marietta's betrayal was not just a plot point. It was a devastating and very human mistake, committed not out of malice but out of fear. Her story was a mirror to the core question of the book. When you are forced to choose between safety and doing what is right, what will you choose? Marietta chose safety, but safety came with a cost. The consequences were not just physical. She became an outcast. Her friendship with Cho was strained, nearly destroyed. Cho tried to defend her, of course. In the book, Cho's defense was passionate but misguided. She was really sorry, she told Hermione. But that was not enough. The others saw Marietta not as a girl caught between loyalties, but as the face of treachery. In many ways, the jinx Hermione placed on the parchment was a test, not just of security, but of character. And while some might question whether branding someone with a permanent curse is ethical, in the world of Harry Potter, where danger was real and betrayal could be lethal, it served a crucial purpose. It was a warning, a deterrent. It reminded every member of the army that their choices had weight, that loyalty meant everything. The emotional depth of this betrayal is hard to overstate. For Cho, it was the beginning of isolation. Her romance with Harry was already strained by Cedric's death, by Harry's awkwardness, by her own emotional turmoil. But Marietta's betrayal made everything worse. Harry couldn't forgive her friend, Hermione didn't even try to, and Cho was left standing between two worlds, the loyalty to her friend and her lingering feelings for Harry. By removing Marietta from the film adaptation, the story lost not only a character but a moral lesson. Her absence robbed Hermione of one of her most defining moments, not a moment of academic achievement, but of political cunning. Hermione wasn't just a bookworm, she was a warrior in the making. The jinx was her way of saying, "I will not let you hurt my friends." It was her own declaration of war. Number 15, the story of Winky the house elf. In the sprawling narrative of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, one character's silent tragedy unfolds quietly behind the noise of Triwizard glory and the return of Lord Voldemort. Winky, the loyal house elf of the Crouch family, bears a tale rarely spoken in the grand retellings of the series, a story of duty, disgrace, and the invisible chains of servitude that define the place of house elves in the wizarding world. Her narrative, though largely erased in the cinematic adaptation, echoes with emotional weight and a sharp critique of magical society's indifference to suffering hidden in plain sight. Winky's tale begins not in Hogwarts but in the lush, enchanted stands of the Quidditch World Cup, where wizards from across the globe gather for spectacle. She is first seen by Harry and his friends when she is attempting to hold a seat in the top box, clumsily perched in the air, for her master, Bartemius Crouch Senior, unseen and largely ignored. She reflects the reality of most house elves, omnipresent, yet barely acknowledged. It is only when disaster strikes, when the dark mark is cast into the sky, that she becomes the centre of a scandal. Winky is found unconscious, clutching Harry's wand, and is immediately accused of casting the terrible symbol. Despite her protests and the questionable logic of blaming a house elf for such powerful magic, Crouch dismisses Winky in front of everyone. In a moment that is both humiliating and heartbreaking, Winky is stripped of her purpose. Winky has behaved tonight in a manner I would not have believed possible. I have no use for a house elf who disobeys me, Crouch declares coldly. The very fabric of her identity unravels in that instant. For house elves, loyalty is not only expected, it is bred into them, a part of who they are. Winky's dismissal is not a liberation, but a spiritual wound. Unlike Dobby, who seeks freedom and individuality, Winky sees her release as a disgrace. Her loyalty to the Crouch family is absolute, even to the point of self-destruction. She believes deeply in the hierarchy that has been instilled in her. In her mind, serving is not just her duty, it is her essence. Winky is properly ashamed of being freed, she cries when confronted by Dobby, illustrating a fundamental difference in their perception of freedom. While Dobby embraces emancipation, Winky is shattered by it. The freedom she never desired becomes a burden she cannot carry. When Winky arrives at Hogwarts, she is taken in by Dumbledore and given a position in the kitchens. But she does not thrive. Her trauma festers in the shadows, and she falls into a deep and chronic depression. Her suffering is visible in every description Rowling gives. Her clothes are filthy, her hands tremble, and her eyes brim constantly with tears. She takes to drinking heavily. Butterbeer, though weak by wizard standards, is potent to house elves. Winky becomes a ghost of herself, clinging to the memory of her master, lost in sorrow and shame. Her emotional decline is not just personal tragedy, it is also a mirror held up to the wizarding world. Winky's plight reflects the systemic exploitation of house elves who are bred to serve and punished for desiring anything more. Hermione Granger, ever attuned to injustice, is one of the few who sees this clearly. Through the creation of SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, Hermione tries, clumsily perhaps but sincerely, to awaken the wizarding world to the moral crisis simmering beneath its gleaming surface. Winky becomes central to this effort, though not as a willing participant. Despite Hermione's attempts to help her, Winky remains fiercely loyal to the Crouch name. She refuses to speak ill of her master, even when it is revealed that she was guarding his son, Bartemius Crouch Jr., at the World Cup. The truth emerges slowly. Barty Crouch Jr., thought to be long dead, was in fact hidden and kept under the imperious curse in the Crouch household. Winky had helped conceal this dark secret. Her crime was not casting the dark mark, but allowing herself to be manipulated in the name of misguided loyalty. This revelation strikes at the heart of her suffering. Winky did not betray her master. She followed his will. To the bitter end, she protected his name, his secrets, his shame. The real tragedy is that even in the face of abandonment and disgrace, she clings to the belief that she deserved her fate. Her self-worth is tethered entirely to her role as a servant. When Dobby scolds her for her drinking, she responds with pathetic clarity. Winky is not doing wrong by drinking, Dobby. Winky is getting over her grief. Winky is a good elf. Winky is a good elf. Winky's decline contrasts sharply with Dobby's growth. Dobby thrives in his freedom, choosing to work at Hogwarts for wages, taking pride in his autonomy. He sews his own clothes, demands respect, and ultimately dies as a free elf. Winky, meanwhile, withers. Her tragedy is not that she was mistreated, though she was, but that she was indoctrinated to believe her mistreatment was righteous. Her depression is not just sorrow, but identity collapse. Without servitude, she does not know who she is. In this way, Rowling presents two distinct trajectories, one of liberation, one of destruction. The juxtaposition is deliberate. It exposes the complex psychology of systemic oppression. While some can rise above it, others are broken by it. Winky becomes a symbol not of hope, but of the cost of indoctrination and the tragedy of unquestioned loyalty. Her suffering is a quiet indictment of the wizarding world's refusal to confront the moral rot beneath its traditions. The omission of Winky's storyline in the films is more than a narrative loss. It is a lost opportunity to explore one of the most ethically complex threads in the series. In choosing to focus solely on spectacle, the films abandon the deeper social commentary that Rowling threads through her books. Winky is not just a background character, she is a reflection of the world's injustice and of how even good people, like Bartemius Crouch Sr., can perpetuate evil through cold adherence to law and order. Number 16, the true friendship between Harry and Dobby. It began not with a handshake, but with a warning. Dobby the house elf appeared in Harry Potter's life during the summer before his second year at Hogwarts in the Chamber of Secrets. He didn't bring gifts or cheerful greetings, he brought chaos and a cry for help. While the film adaptation reduced this meeting to an eccentric nuisance, the book version offers something far richer. The beginning of a relationship forged in fear, loyalty, and deep mutual respect. Dobby's actions at first glance seemed erratic. He disrupted a dinner party at the Dursleys by dropping a cake on a guest's head and later enchanted a rogue bludger to chase Harry. To an outsider, these stunts painted Dobby as unstable, perhaps even dangerous, but J.K. Rowling crafts these moments to reveal a house elf acting from desperation and devotion. Dobby's purpose was never mischief. He was trying, within the limits of his knowledge and power, to protect Harry from the danger brewing in the Chamber of Secrets. This, in itself, is the purest expression of friendship. Risk without reward, help without request. Most readers will recall how Harry eventually freed Dobby by tricking Lucius Malfoy into handing the elf a sock. This was no simple act of rebellion. For Dobby it was salvation. For Harry it was a moral stand. "Dobby is free," he cried, clutching the sock like a holy relic. But Rowling did more than just give the elf his freedom. She gave Harry a new kind of companion, one outside the bounds of his school life, family woes, or Gryffindor identity. A friend who saw him not as a celebrity or chosen one, but as someone worth saving simply for being kind. The films treat this moment with some reverence, but they never explore what followed. In the books, Harry doesn't just free Dobby and forget him. Their friendship evolves. In the Goblet of Fire, Harry learns that Dobby is now working at Hogwarts, where Albus Dumbledore agrees to pay him a wage, something no elf had ever requested. Harry insists on ensuring that Dobby gets proper clothes and pay. "He's asking for 1 galleon a week," Hermione reports with surprise, "and 1 day off a month." The humble request and Harry's immediate support of it demonstrate a quiet solidarity. In a world full of hierarchies, Harry treats Dobby as an equal. The most poignant example of their bond comes through socks. Dobby loves socks, particularly mismatched ones, which he considers a symbol of freedom. Harry, understanding this, begins gifting Dobby socks regularly. On Christmas, he gives Dobby a pair he had knit himself, one red with broomsticks, the other green with snitches. This isn't about fashion, it's about thoughtfulness. In giving Dobby socks, Harry gives him something more lasting than freedom. He gives him dignity. Their friendship is not based on proximity, obligation, or convenience. It is rooted in shared values. Dobby idolizes Harry not because he is famous, but because he is just. Dobby admires how Harry treats others, the way he defends Neville Longbottom, his loyalty to Hagrid, his refusal to bully or belittle. And Harry, in turn, sees in Dobby a kind of courage that often goes unnoticed. It is not the lion's roar, but the whisper in the dark, defying masters, breaking magical laws, acting alone. When we arrive at Order of the Phoenix, Dobby's loyalty intensifies. He leads Harry to the Room of Requirement, an act that eventually allows Dumbledore's army to thrive. Without Dobby, there would be no secret training sessions, no quiet rebellion against Umbridge. His role is subtle, often off-page, but vital. The films assign the room's discovery to Neville, a change that robs Dobby of one of his most crucial contributions to the Resistance. The omission of this detail from the movies is more than just a script change. It erases the depth of Dobby's engagement in the cause. He is not a comic relief or a background servant. He is a freedom fighter in his own right, and his consistent acts of bravery reflect the same kind of defiance that runs through Harry himself. When Harry tells him in Half-Blood Prince, "You've been brilliant, Dobby," it's not patronizing, it's sincere. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching demonstration of their friendship occurs in the Deathly Hallows. When Harry and his friends are imprisoned in the cellar of Malfoy Manor, it is Dobby who appears, summoned by Aberforth through the mirror shard. The moment is pure tension. There is no time for pleasantries, no moment to reminisce. But Harry's reaction is immediate and telling. He says Dobby's name with something like relief and hope. "Dobby!" he gasps, as if the very sound of the name means rescue. Dobby doesn't hesitate. He disapparates with Luna Lovegood and Dean Thomas, then returns for Harry, Ron, Hermione, Griphook, and Ollivander. The rescue is executed with frantic bravery, and then, just as freedom is within reach, a knife thrown by Bellatrix Lestrange finds its mark. Dobby dies in Harry's arms, whispering, "Such a beautiful place, to be with friends. Dobby is happy to be with his friend Harry Potter." This line is one of the most devastating in the entire series. It is not just the death of a beloved character, it is the death of a friend. Harry doesn't treat it as a loss of a servant or magical creature. He digs a grave with his own hands, no magic, no shortcuts. He marks the grave with a headstone that reads, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." In those few words, Harry honors everything that made their friendship unique: freedom, choice, and love. The films include this scene, but stripped of context, it loses its full emotional impact. For viewers who haven't read the books, Dobby's death is sad, but not seismic. They see a quirky elf perish, but readers see a warrior fall. They remember every sock, every warning, every moment of unseen aid. They see not just a creature, but a comrade. It is worth noting that Harry is not a particularly expressive character. He rarely verbalizes affection, but his actions toward Dobby speak volumes. He defends him in public, fights for his rights in private, and mourns him like family. It is Harry at his most human, not as the boy who lived, but as the boy who cared. Even Dumbledore, with all his wisdom, cannot fully match the pure egalitarianism Harry shows Dobby. The wizarding world accepts house elves as a subservient class. Most wizards don't question this, but Harry does, not with long speeches or protest banners, but through empathy, through friendship. Dobby, in turn, is more than grateful. He becomes part of Harry's larger battle. Not through prophecy or bloodline, but through will. He chooses to help. He chooses Harry. This matters because so many characters in the series are bound by fate. Dobby is bound only by heart. Their relationship is also one of contrasts. Harry, born into neglect and cruelty, rises into power and fame. Dobby, born into servitude, seeks only to serve well. And yet they meet in the middle as two beings trying to protect what they love. Their friendship is not dramatic or loud. It grows in quiet corners, in kitchens, in corridors, in whispered warnings. In a world brimming with spells and prophecies, theirs is a bond built on the most muggle of things: kindness. When Harry gives Dobby his first gift, he doesn't realize he's giving him more than a sock. He's giving him a place in his heart. And Dobby, for all his trembling fear, holds that place with ferocity. The books show us that heroes don't always wear cloaks. Sometimes they wear pillowcases, and sometimes they stand up to dark wizards, not with wands, but with stubborn devotion. Dobby's bravery is not in duels, it's in defiance, not in power, but in principle. Harry learns from Dobby too. In a world that constantly tries to rank people by blood, wealth, and house, Dobby shows Harry a truth he never forgot, that worth is measured in choices, not ancestry, not magic, just choice. Their friendship ends not in a moment of triumph, but in silence, on a beach, under the stars, beside a grave. But in truth, it never ends. Harry carries Dobby with him through the war, through grief, and into the future. Because real friendship, the kind forged in fire, doesn't vanish with death. It remains like magic in the heart. Number 17, the mirror of Sirius and its deeper meaning. In the quiet aftermath of Christmas at 12 Grimmauld Place, a curious object was pressed into Harry Potter's hands by his godfather, Sirius Black. It came without ceremony, a modest mirror encased in a worn frame. Sirius merely hinted at its use, telling Harry that if he ever needed to speak with him, he should use it. But Harry, in the whirlwind of mounting danger and growing responsibility, tucked it away, never unwrapping the package or considering its significance. The mirror would lie forgotten beneath socks and spellbooks, while the war crept ever closer. That one small decision, overlooking a gift from a man who loved him like family, would haunt Harry more deeply than he could have ever imagined. The mirror Sirius gave Harry was not just any enchanted object. It was part of a two-way communication set, a twin to the one Sirius kept. Crafted for fast and private contact between two people, it was a relic from the Marauders' youth, a way for Sirius and James Potter to speak across dormitories and detentions. But in Harry's case, it could have been something else entirely, a lifeline, a way to reach Sirius before it was too late. When Sirius fell behind the veil in the Department of Mysteries, Harry's grief was magnified by regret. He remembered the package, he remembered the unopened mirror, and he realized, too late, that he might have saved Sirius if he had only looked inside. The books make this clear in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where Harry, devastated after Sirius's death, searches his belongings and finally finds the mirror. He turned the package over and saw, in Sirius's handwriting, the words, "This is a two-way mirror. I've got the other one. If you need to speak to me, just say my name into it. You'll appear in my mirror, and I'll be able to talk in yours." The weight of this discovery crushed Harry. He had the means to ask Sirius if his vision in the Department of Mysteries was real. He could have avoided the trap, but instead he had rushed into danger, and Sirius had paid with his life. The films glossed over this entire subplot. The mirror appears briefly without explanation or significance. Casual viewers are left confused when, in the Deathly Hallows, Harry suddenly pulls out a shard of glass and sees a blue eye looking back at him. Without context, the moment feels disjointed, a magical device dropped into the narrative like a deus ex machina. But for readers, that fragment carries emotional weight and narrative depth. It is not just a piece of glass, it is a fragment of a mistake, a symbol of a young man burdened by guilt and learning, painfully, what it means to grow up. That mirror, the one Harry neglected and later shattered, was more than a communication tool. It became a metaphor for the irreversible nature of choice. Harry's initial disregard for the mirror illustrates the naivete of youth, how we often ignore help when it's most readily available, only to yearn for it when it's gone. Sirius's gift was one of trust and protection, but Harry, overwhelmed by his own isolation and confusion, could not see its value. The mirror, both whole and broken, is thus a reflection of Harry himself, fractured, burdened by loss, and slowly learning what it means to carry the weight of others' sacrifices. When Harry finally uses the shard of the mirror in the Deathly Hallows, it's not to reach Sirius, but someone entirely unexpected, Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's estranged brother. The man who once resented his brother's ambitions now becomes a reluctant ally to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The shard leads them to Hogsmeade, where Aberforth rescues them from certain death. He then opens a secret passage through Ariana Dumbledore's portrait that leads directly to the Room of Requirement, ensuring the trio's return to Hogwarts and, ultimately, to the final battle. Aberforth's appearance through the mirror is a crucial pivot in the narrative. He provides sanctuary, insight, and resources. More importantly, his involvement deepens the emotional arc of the Dumbledore family and adds complexity to the mythos of the elder brother Harry, once idolized. Through the mirror, we do not just find help, we find history, regret, and buried wounds. "You're not the only one who lost someone that night," Aberforth tells Harry, his voice heavy with bitterness and unspoken stories. And in that moment, Harry is reminded once again that everyone carries scars, even the ones who seem untouchable. This chain of events, the forgotten gift, the lost opportunity, and the eventual redemption through Aberforth, forms one of the more poignant emotional threads in the Harry Potter series. It underscores the idea that our mistakes can still lead to salvation, that broken things can still guide us, and that sometimes the echoes of our regrets are what bring us home. The mirror's path from Sirius to Harry to Aberforth is, in itself, a symbolic journey, from reckless youth to grieving survivor to the wisdom of reluctant acceptance. The emotional resonance of the mirror's arc is magnified by the fact that Harry clings to the shard even when it seems useless. It becomes a kind of talisman, not just a link to Sirius, but a fragment of hope carried in secret, a silent companion in the darkest moments. As he camps in the wilderness, hunted and hollow, Harry occasionally glimpses the flash of a blue eye in the glass and wonders, always wonders, who is watching. The fragment becomes a narrative whisper, a reminder that he is not truly alone, even in despair. What is striking is how Rowling never directly tells the reader that the mirror symbolizes regret or loss. She lets the object speak through its history, through the way Harry interacts with it, and through the final, crucial role it plays. The mirror is not just a magical device, it is a storytelling relic, bearing the emotional fingerprints of multiple characters, woven through with history and meaning. Its subtle presence reminds the reader that the past is never gone. It lingers in objects, in memories, in missed chances. Sirius himself was a figure of duality, reckless but loving, flawed but fiercely loyal. His gift to Harry, then, reflects not just a practical tool, but a gesture of faith. He wanted Harry to have a way to reach him, to be protected, to know that he wasn't alone. That Harry ignored the gift is not a condemnation of him, but a reflection of the tragic complexity of growing up in a world that offers no time for reflection. He was too young to recognize the importance of what he'd been given, and by the time he did, the chance was gone. This makes the moment Harry sees the blue eye in the mirror all the more powerful. At first, he believes it's Dumbledore. But Dumbledore is dead, so who is watching him? The answer unfolds slowly, and when Aberforth is revealed as the eye behind the glass, the story takes a deeply human turn. Here is a man who has also known loss, who has also been sidelined, forgotten, overshadowed by a greater name. Yet he too responds to the call. He helps because even broken people can still be heroes. The mirror, then, is not only a bridge between people, but between generations, between the youthful idealism of Sirius and James and the hardened pragmatism of Aberforth. It connects joy and tragedy, life and death, mistake and redemption. In that sense, it is one of the most thematically rich objects in the series. Its absence in the films robs the audience of this intricate thread, reducing a layered, painful, and ultimately redemptive arc into a confusing plot point with no emotional foundation. This missing piece is not a minor oversight. It fundamentally alters how we view Harry's growth. Without the mirror, we miss the full weight of his regrets, we miss the depth of his loss, and we miss how that loss later becomes a tool for salvation. In stories, objects are not just tools, they are echoes. The mirror echoed Sirius's love, Harry's guilt, and Aberforth's hidden strength. Its silent glass reflected a web of emotions that no spell could conjure. Moreover, the mirror's narrative function elevates it above mere magical utility. It is not used for spectacle but for meaning. In a series often defined by explosive battles and dazzling charms, the mirror stands apart, quiet, intimate, and profoundly human. It does not change the world through power, but through presence. It is a reminder that even in silence, some objects speak volumes. The significance of the mirror is only heightened when we consider what it could have changed. If Harry had used it earlier, Sirius might have lived. If he had opened the package, read the note, taken it seriously, he might not have walked into a trap. That he didn't is not a narrative flaw, it is the very essence of human error. We forget, we misplace, we overlook, and sometimes those small oversights become life-altering. The mirror holds that truth within it like a memory frozen in glass. In the end, it is through that same fragment of glass that Hogwarts is reclaimed. Aberforth opens the way, the students rise, the final battle begins, and Harry, older now, shaped by pain and tempered by love, fights not just for survival, but for redemption. The mirror, cracked and diminished, fulfills its promise not by offering words, but by becoming a passage from mistake to action, from grief to courage. Sirius Black is gone, but his mirror remains, a small, quiet remnant of who he was and what he hoped for Harry. And Harry, having carried its weight, does not let it go. Even in the chaos of war, even in the noise of prophecy and death, he clutches the glass, because sometimes the things we've broken still carry us home. Number 18, The Students' Rebellion Against Umbridge. When Dolores Umbridge stepped through the doors of Hogwarts clad in pink and sugar-coated authority, few could have predicted the storm she would unleash. Appointed as the Hogwarts High Inquisitor by the Ministry of Magic, her reign soon spiraled into an oppressive regime where whispers replaced laughter and fear echoed through the stone corridors. But what the Ministry failed to understand, and what Umbridge never grasped, was that Hogwarts was no ordinary school. It was a sanctuary of spirit, rebellion, and memory, and its students were not mere children. In the book Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, J.K. Rowling paints a detailed and thrilling portrait of a student uprising that unfolds not with swords and shields, but with cleverness, humour, and unyielding defiance. While the film adaptation offered glimpses of resistance, it brushed over the richness of the rebellion that roared through Hogwarts like a quiet thunder, alive in every hallway, hidden behind every tapestry. It began, as many revolutions do, with silence, a suffocating kind of silence that settled over the classrooms as Umbridge dismissed the importance of practical defence. Her theory-based approach to the dark arts was met with disbelief, then fury. When Hermione Granger, unable to contain her indignation, questioned the rationale behind such absurdity, Umbridge responded with a smile that chilled the blood and a decree that silenced dissent. But silence, it turned out, only stoked the fire. Soon that fire took form in Dumbledore's army. While the film recognized this pivotal act of rebellion, it failed to capture its scope. Meetings in the Room of Requirement were not just training sessions, they were a rediscovery of purpose. Neville Longbottom, who had once trembled at every shadow, began to stand taller, casting shield charms with conviction. Luna Lovegood, dreamy and ethereal, revealed a piercing intelligence as she mastered defensive hexes. The DA was more than a club, it was a resistance cell. But resistance extended far beyond the secret room. The corridors themselves began to turn against Umbridge. Fred and George Weasley, the twin architects of chaos, became the unspoken generals of mischief. They released a barrage of enchanted fireworks that defied logic and magical suppression. One dragon-shaped firework spiraled through the halls, roaring and chasing terrified inquisitorial squad members, while another exploded into a blazing phoenix, its wings unfurling in triumphant defiance. "You can't cancel the fireworks," George had once joked, but in truth they had become symbols. These were not random acts of mischief, they were strategic. One student bewitched a corridor to swallow anyone who uttered the word detention, a prank that trapped Umbridge herself for over an hour. Another jinx turned all the doorknobs in the West Wing into soap, sending the inquisitorial squad into a frothy mess. Students orchestrated diversions to keep Umbridge occupied, while others met in the room of requirement. The castle became alive with rebellion, each stone echoing with hidden laughter. Perhaps the most hilarious and telling moment came when a student, in a masterstroke of absurdity, solemnly declared that he had seen a six-eyed goat giving a lecture on transfiguration. It was nonsense, of course, but that was precisely the point. The absurdity mirrored the absurdity of Umbridge's rules. It was a weapon against her seriousness. Even Professor McGonagall, stern and unsmiling, couldn't suppress the flicker of amusement when chaos reigned just outside her classroom. Filch, the caretaker, and Umbridge's eager ally, became a tragic-comic figure, frantically trying to keep up with the escalating anarchy. He hung chains, locked doors, and threatened detention with his usual glee, but it was never enough. The students were simply too clever. Parchment enchanted to scream insults, quills that wrote messages in mid-air. Once, the grand staircase rerouted itself in an endless loop, causing the entire inquisitorial squad to march in circles for an entire afternoon. But resistance wasn't only noisy, there were quiet acts of bravery too. Cho Chang, still mourning Cedric Diggory, found strength in the DA's cause. Ginny Weasley, fierce and unapologetic, became a fiery presence in training and in pranks. Even Seamus Finnegan, once doubtful of Harry's claims about Voldemort, stepped forward with a grim determination, learning to cast spells that might one day save his life. Each student found their own way to fight. What made the student rebellion so powerful was its unity. They were divided by houses, yes, and by personal feuds and rivalries, but against Umbridge there was solidarity. Hufflepuffs passed secret notes, Ravenclaws created enchanted decoys, even a few Slytherins, quietly disillusioned with the Ministry's lies, turned a blind eye to DA activity. It was the most alive Hogwarts had felt since Dumbledore's departure. Rowling gives us moments of brilliance that the film never touches. One such moment is when Peeves, the resident poltergeist, becomes a reluctant ally. Usually a nuisance, he is encouraged by none other than Professor McGonagall to wreak havoc. "It unscrews the other way," she whispers, as Peeves struggles to remove a chandelier. It's a tiny moment, but one that encapsulates the shared spirit of resistance. Even the staff, bound by rules, found ways to push back. The rebellion crescendoed with Fred and George's grand exit. With final year exams approaching, they chose an explosive farewell. A massive swamp materialized in a corridor. A fireworks display erupted, and the twins soared through the air on broomsticks, saluting the chaos they had helped inspire. As they vanished into the sky, the students erupted in cheers. It wasn't just a prank, and it was a call to arms, a statement of freedom. In their absence, others stepped up. Lee Jordan became a master of misdirection, drawing Umbridge's attention away from secret meetings. Younger students, once frightened, began to mimic the DA's spells. Even the enchanted suits of armor seemed to rattle more loudly when Umbridge passed. There was magic in the resistance, not just spellwork, but a deeper magic of courage and conviction. One cannot forget the role of the Room of Requirement itself, which seemed to grow in intelligence, shielding its occupants and shifting its layout to evade discovery. It wasn't just a room, it was a participant. In its walls echoed the voices of past students who had dared to dream and defy. Not all moments were triumphant. There were consequences. Marietta Edgecombe's betrayal came as a sharp reminder of the risks. Her name, forever etched on her forehead by Hermione's enchantment, served as a living warning. The DA might have been hidden, but it was vulnerable. Still, the students pushed forward. Fear only sharpened their resolve. Harry, their reluctant leader, never fully grasped how much he inspired them. To him it was a necessity, a way to prepare for a war already at their door. But to the others, he was a symbol, his scar, his defiance, his grief. All of it reminded them of what was at stake. Their rebellion wasn't just against Umbridge, it was against fear, denial, and the erosion of truth. Through all of this, the spirit of Hogwarts transformed. The Great Hall, once a place of passive meals, became a hub of whispered messages and coded glances, the staircases ever shifting, aided or hindered based on their own mysterious loyalties. Even the portraits seemed to keep watch, relaying rumours and warnings. The castle became a character in the resistance, alive and watchful. By the time Dumbledore returned, the students had changed. They were no longer simply learners, they were warriors in waiting, dreamers with wands, mischief-makers with cause. And though the film hinted at rebellion, only the book captured its heartbeat. As Rowling wrote, differences of habit and language are nothing at all if our aims are identical and our hearts are open. In the end, the student rebellion of Order of the Phoenix wasn't just about pranks or defiance, it was about belief in each other, in the truth, and in the right to fight back when power turns cruel. It was a lesson wrapped in laughter, coded in chaos, and etched into the walls of a school that never stood idly by when darkness threatened. Number 19, Professor Binns and the Early Hints of Horcruxes. It is perhaps one of the strangest ironies of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry that the most ghostly and ethereal of teachers was also the most rooted in the dry dust of history. Professor Cuthbert Binns, the ghostly history of magic teacher, was not known for fire or passion in his lectures, but for droning monologues that lulled most students into a near sleep. Yet it was this same forgotten figure who, in a moment rarely recalled, ushered Harry Potter into the shadowed corridors of one of the darkest magical legacies, the tale of the Chamber of Secrets, and indirectly, the history of Horcruxes. When one speaks of Horcruxes, the mind naturally drifts to Albus Dumbledore and his solemn lessons in the 6th book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It is there, under the gloom of candlelight and the weight of unspoken truths, that Dumbledore reveals to Harry the depth of Tom Riddle's obsession with immortality. But Dumbledore's lectures were the culmination of knowledge built over time. The first seeds, as surprising as it might seem, were sown much earlier, on a quiet day in the 2nd year of Harry's education, inside the unassuming History of Magic classroom. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Binns becomes the unexpected source of a legend that would reverberate through the rest of the series. During what should have been an ordinary lecture on the International Warlock Convention of 1289, Hermione Granger's determined hand interrupted the monotony. She had heard whispers, rumours that the Chamber of Secrets had been opened before. This single question derailed the day's curriculum and led to a rare deviation in Binns's usual style: storytelling. It was Professor Binns who told the class about Salazar Slytherin and the founding of Hogwarts. In his words, Salazar Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families. Binns, while detached and skeptical of legends, recounted the rift that grew between Slytherin and the other founders. He mentioned how Slytherin left the school, but not before, as the legend claimed, building a hidden chamber beneath the castle. That chamber, said to house a monster, could only be opened by his heir. At the time, Binns scoffed at the idea of the chamber's existence, calling it absurd. He dismissed the story as fairy tale nonsense, adding, "It is a myth, it does not exist." But what he could not see, and what Harry and his friends would eventually discover, was that this tale was not only true, but it contained the early clues to a truth far more sinister, that Tom Riddle, the boy who would become Lord Voldemort, had already set himself on a path toward the creation of Horcruxes. The idea that Salazar Slytherin left a monster behind, a basilisk as it turned out, was more than a myth. It was a precursor to the obsession with legacy, purity, and deathlessness that Voldemort would later embody. Binns, despite his rigid academic skepticism, was passing on a torch lit centuries before. He was naming names, connecting myths with history, and giving shape to Voldemort's ideological ancestry. Though he did not speak of Horcruxes directly, no teacher would dare mention them so early in a child's education, the path was being charted step by careful step. The Chamber of Secrets was a Horcrux before Harry or even Dumbledore understood the term. The diary of Tom Riddle, later revealed to be one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, used the legend of the chamber as its bait and vessel. It possessed Ginny Weasley and used her fear and confusion to reopen the very doors Binns had declared fictional. Thus the legend Binns reluctantly repeated in his dry, nasal voice became prophecy. There is something deeply poetic about the fact that Professor Binns, who once fell asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind, was the one to utter the names that led Harry toward the heart of Voldemort's darkness. A man so obsessed with routine, with dusty parchment and long-forgotten treaties, had unknowingly helped set the stage for the great battle between life and death, between soul and soul-splitting magic. In many ways, Binns was the embodiment of what magic history had become at Hogwarts, a series of names, dates, and locations devoid of emotional weight. But in this one moment he crossed the threshold into something more alive. He told of the founders not as sterile icons, but as people divided by ideology. He recounted how myths can mask truths and how dangerous truths hide in the cracks of what we call legend. Without realizing it, he was teaching the first real lesson in the nature of dark magic. That its power lies not in spells, but in the stories we choose to believe. What makes Binns's contribution to the narrative so fascinating is how thoroughly overlooked he is in the films. In the cinematic version of Chamber of Secrets, it is Professor McGonagall who delivers the explanation about the chamber's legend. Her rendition is haunting, delivered with gravitas, but it lacks the eerie dissonance of Binns' ghostly disinterest. By replacing him, the films sacrificed a strangely humorous, yet meaningful moment, a moment when history itself, quite literally undead, spoke the truth. Binns represents a different kind of horror, one not made of curses or blood, but of forgetfulness. He is what happens when the past is ignored, when legends are laughed off, and when warnings from history are dismissed as bedtime stories. It is no coincidence that the Horcruxes, vessels of broken souls, hid behind similar shadows. Like Binns, they existed in the gaps of what people refused to believe. In Dumbledore's later lessons to Harry, when he finally reveals the dark magic of Horcruxes, the connection to Salazar Slytherin becomes undeniable. The ring of Marvolo Gaunt, passed down through a family obsessed with Slytherin's bloodline. The locket of Slytherin, once thought lost, turned into a container for a fragment of Voldemort's soul. These objects weren't chosen at random. They were sacred relics, items rooted in history that Binns might have once lectured about without ever grasping their darker utility. It is tempting to imagine what might have happened if Binns had not been so dismissive, if he had allowed himself to speculate, to imagine that myths might be more than exaggerations. Would Hogwarts have been better prepared? Could Dumbledore have acted sooner if the legend had been more widely believed? Or was Binns, in his blindness, just another necessary step in the unfolding of prophecy? Of course, Binns was not evil. He was not cruel or conniving. He was merely a symbol of a greater danger, the passive enabler, the one who carries knowledge but declines to see its implications, the one who teaches students but fails to truly educate. In this, he is an unintentional mirror of Voldemort's own early teachers, those who saw brilliance but not the black hunger beneath it. He is what happens when history is divorced from meaning. There's an old saying that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. In the case of Hogwarts, it seems more accurate to say that those who do not believe in history are doomed to unleash it. The Chamber of Secrets, the legend of Salazar Slytherin, and the creation of Horcruxes were not isolated events. They were threads in a tapestry, and Binns, unaware and unconcerned, was one of the few who had the entire design at his fingertips. He simply lacked the will to look closer. The fact that a ghost could continue teaching forever detached from the living world is already a metaphor made manifest. Binns is history, personified, floating, insubstantial, barely noticed. He speaks, but few listen. He knows, but he forgets what it means. And in that way, he is the perfect ironic guardian of the knowledge that would one day be essential in destroying the most dangerous wizard of all time. It is worth noting that Binns never appears during any major battle. He is never seen aiding in the defense of the school, never intervenes in the great conflicts that unfold. He remains where he always was, in the classroom, delivering lectures to an increasingly indifferent audience. But his influence endures in a subtler way. It was his story, dismissed as myth, that became the roadmap to a buried truth. It was his lecture, forgotten by most, that opened the first door Harry would step through toward understanding the nature of Voldemort. The diary, the locket, the cup, the ring. Each Horcrux was a piece of history twisted into something profane. And it was Binns, droning on about founders and chambers, who gave those objects their first names. He showed Harry that history, even in its driest form, has teeth. In the end, perhaps it is fitting that Binns remains largely forgotten. He would not have sought glory or recognition, but to those who look back carefully, who trace the winding roots of Voldemort's darkness, he remains a vital, if spectral, presence. His class was the gateway, his tale was the warning, and his name, though rarely spoken, lingers quietly in the legacy of how the boy who lived began to learn what it meant to face death and conquer it not with power, but with understanding. Number 20, Peeves the Poltergeist and his missing role. In the winding, candlelit corridors of Hogwarts, where secrets whispered through stone and shadows danced under floating torches, there once lived, or rather existed, a spirit unlike any other. Peeves the Poltergeist was not a ghost in the traditional sense. He had never died, nor did he ever truly live. He was chaos incarnate, the embodiment of youthful rebellion, of the magic that refused to be tamed. Hogwarts, with its layers of history and solemn traditions, harboured 1,000 mysteries, and Peeves was one of its most persistent. Mentioned in nearly every book, Peeves appeared whenever the mood needed lightening, or whenever trouble needed stirring. He was a hurricane of marbles, water balloons, chalk missiles, and expletive-riddled songs. But beneath the comic relief lay a deeper truth. Peeves represented the wild heartbeat of the school itself, its refusal to bend entirely to authority. For all his ridiculousness, Peeves served as a mirror to the power struggles at play within those castle walls. When Umbridge marched in, armed with her decrees and her pink tyranny, Peeves was not a mere nuisance. He was resistance. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Peeves became more than a prankster. Dolores Umbridge, with her sickly smiles and cruel punishments, tried to squash the spirit of the school. Students were cowed, professors walked on eggshells, and Harry found himself increasingly isolated. But then came the poltergeist, like a jester in the court of a despot, mocking power with defiance. When Professor McGonagall, ever the bastion of stern integrity, whispered, "It unscrews the other way," as Peeves struggled with a chandelier to drop on Umbridge, it was more than a comic moment. It was a silent alliance. Chaos had become rebellion. Peeves never answered to the headmaster. Not even Dumbledore could fully control him. But there was one figure he respected, the castle's caretaker, Argus Filch, whom he tormented with relentless glee. The relationship between Filch and Peeves was one of bitter rivalry. Filch, a squib, resented the magical world's indifference to order. Peeves, a creature of magic untethered, existed solely to disrupt it. Their antagonism was epic, extending to floating ink blots on freshly cleaned floors and dung bombs in the trophy room. And yet, for all their animosity, Hogwarts would not have been complete without their ceaseless war. In the first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Peeves hounded Harry and his friends with glee, almost exposing them to Filch when they sneaked around at night. He lobbed chalk and screamed songs of mockery. In another passage, he tried to throw walking sticks at Neville, cackling all the while. But these weren't merely jokes. In the early books, when the reader is still absorbing the newness of Hogwarts, Peeves is a symbol that this place is alive, reactive, and, at times, dangerous. Peeves wasn't safe. He wasn't friendly. But he was honest. He was Hogwarts, uncensored. It was in the Deathly Hallows that Peeves's role reached its crescendo. During the Battle of Hogwarts, as Death Eaters swarmed the halls and giants battered the doors, Peeves rose like a banshee of bedlam. "Give her hell from us, Peeves," yelled Fred and George's younger brother Percy, freshly reconciled with his family. Peeves, hearing the call to arms, whirled into action. No longer just a prankster, he was now a warrior of chaos. He dived through the air, dropping chairs and vases on invaders, singing war songs and creating enough havoc to distract the enemy. He became, in that moment, a guardian of the school. And yet Peeves was not granted a single second in the films, not one frame, not one scene, not one mischievous cackle echoed across the silver screen. His absence was palpable. For a story so rich in texture, in mood and atmosphere, to omit a figure so critical to its tone was a loss. Rick Mayall, the British comedian originally cast to play him, reportedly filmed scenes for the first movie, scenes that were later cut entirely. The decision robbed the audience of a character who, in many ways, embodied the very soul of the school. In the books, it was never just about Peeves being funny. It was the way his presence changed the way readers saw Hogwarts. This wasn't a sterile boarding school. It was a living, breathing institution, complete with a poltergeist who threw tantrums and toilet seats. Peeves was the perfect counterweight to the more terrifying aspects of the magical world. He reminded us that magic, while powerful and dark at times, could also be absurd. In a universe teetering between light and shadow, he was a necessary dose of irreverence. There's a scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban where Peeves stuffs gum into a keyhole, jamming the door. It seems trivial, but Professor Flitwick's struggle to unstick it with spells showcases how even the most powerful wizards could be undone by nonsense. It's the very nature of Peeves. His magic is illogical, uncontainable. In this, he represents something primal and unique about the wizarding world. Not everything needs a purpose to exist. Some magic is simply madness. The books repeatedly describe him in vivid, wild imagery, a little man in a bell-covered hat with a wicked, gloating face. He whooped, giggled, and flew upside down, waving invisible legs and creating bedlam with every appearance. But behind those antics was an old force. Peeves had been in the castle for centuries. He had witnessed generations of students, professors, and wars. He had seen headmasters rise and fall. In his own twisted way, he was the memory of Hogwarts. His loyalty to the school was clear in moments of crisis. When Umbridge banned fun, Peeves responded with an onslaught of mischief that no decree could suppress. When Voldemort attacked, Peeves didn't flee, he fought. In the Deathly Hallows, his battle cry, "We did it! We bashed them! We Potters the one! And Voldy's gone mouldy, so now let's have fun!" was a celebration of victory, but also a tribute to Hogwarts' resilience. In The Half-Blood Prince, as tension mounted within the castle, Peeves became more than a distraction. He was a symbol of unrest. He sensed the darkness growing. His jokes grew wilder, more frenzied. He wasn't just pulling pranks, he was howling against the dread settling in. His presence was like a canary in a coal mine. When Peeves acted out, it meant trouble was coming. Strangely, the one person who could truly command him was the Bloody Baron, Slytherin's terrifying house ghost. It's an unsettling detail. Peeves feared the Baron, and the Baron alone. What did he see in that spectral figure that silenced his shrieks? Was it death, remorse, something deeper? This fear added a mysterious layer to Peeves. He wasn't unstoppable. He had boundaries, though few could enforce them. And that made him all the more fascinating. The absence of Peeves from the films stripped Hogwarts of a key emotional texture. We saw the grandeur of the Great Hall, the mystery of the Forbidden Forest, and the splendor of the Yule Ball. But we never saw chaos unfiltered. We never saw Peeves crashing a feast or drawing moustaches on portraits. We never saw him flinging water balloons at Snape. We missed the manic, magical heartbeat that pulsed beneath the school's stone calm. When Fred and George Weasley launched their fireworks revolt against Umbridge, Peeves should have been there, the god of mischief, blessing his disciples. The trio of troublemakers, the twins and the poltergeist, but were never united on screen, and their alliance in the books felt mythic. Peeves wasn't a friend, but he recognized kindred spirits. When authority went too far, he took the side of chaos. and therefore, oddly, of justice. There's something deeply British about Peeves. He belongs to a long tradition of comic rebels, Shakespearean fools, Dickensian tricksters, Monty Python absurdists. His songs, crude and rhyming, echo playground chants and wartime morale boosters. "Oh, Potter, you rotter, oh, what have you done?" he sang once, teasing Harry when suspicion fell on him. It was cruel, but it was honest. Peeves didn't coddle. He reflected the mood, even when it hurt. Hogwarts in the books is a place of contradictions, danger and safety, wisdom and whimsy. Peeves was that contradiction incarnate. He endangered students, yet defended them. He mocked professors, yet respected the soul of the school. He was never invited, never wanted, yet always there. And perhaps that's the truest testament to his role. Peeves was Hogwarts's unwanted truth, the part of magic you couldn't control or clean up. Even J.K. Rowling acknowledged that Peeves was hard to define. In interviews, she described him as a manifestation of disorder. He was the part of the castle that refused to be polished or perfected. In that sense, he was not just a character. He was a magical force. The castle birthed him, tolerated him, and perhaps even loved him. And he, in return, stayed through wars, bloodshed, and fear, always laughing, always dancing. Readers remember Peeves not just for his jokes, but for his spirit. He reminded us that Hogwarts was not a museum. It was alive. It groaned, whispered, and occasionally screamed. Peeves was that scream. And in a world of tightening rules, dark forces, and adult compromises, his laughter was resistance. His mayhem was memory. And his songs, absurd, rude, delightful, were the soundtrack of a school that refused to be ordinary. Number 21. The continuing legacy of the Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised, tall, cold, and cloaked in shadows, stood once in a forgotten classroom of Hogwarts, revealing not the present nor the truth, but the most desperate desires of the heart. When Harry first encountered it in the Philosopher's Stone, it became a silent confession of longing, showing him the family he never knew. But once that Christmas holiday faded into term time, the mirror vanished. Albus Dumbledore had moved it, claiming, "Men have wasted away before it, not knowing if what they have seen is real, or even possible." And so the mirror, like a whisper of a dream, disappeared from the narrative, at least on the surface. Yet its story did not end there. Though physically absent, the mirror of Erised's presence lingers like a ghost throughout the series. Its essence is etched into the very fabric of Harry's journey. More than a magical object, it became a metaphor for memory, grief, and the dangerous beauty of desire. While the films reduced it to a single moment of poignant revelation, J.K. Rowling's world gave it a far richer legacy, subtle, symbolic, and quietly devastating. The mirror's silence after the first book was not a dismissal, but a pause. For Harry, who had seen his parents' faces in its depths, the mirror represented something too powerful to revisit. Its magic worked not through spells or enchantments, but through the ache of love and loss. Even without physical reappearance, the echo of its vision stayed with him. When he encountered the Resurrection Stone in the Forbidden Forest years later, the feeling was eerily familiar. Standing face to face with the dead once again, James, Lily, Sirius, and Remus, it was as if the mirror had returned in spirit, allowing him one last glimpse of his heart's desire, no longer with longing, but with acceptance. Interestingly, the mirror's influence rippled forward in a different form through an object seemingly unconnected at first. A small, enchanted mirror fragment left to Harry by Sirius Black. This shard became the seed of a hidden continuation, suggesting that the emotional power of Erised had found a quieter, subtler outlet. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry looks into the shard, he sees the eye of a man, blue, fierce, and piercing. For a moment, he believes it is Dumbledore, but the truth is more complex, more human. It is Aberforth, Albus's estranged brother, watching over him through the twin of Sirius's two-way mirror. This moment, heavy with mystery, draws a faint but undeniable line back to Erised. Just as the original mirror revealed the deepest yearning of the soul, the fragment now revealed the hidden connections between past and present, between family and legacy. Aberforth, the lesser-known Dumbledore, became a symbol of that same quiet love and loss, looking out for Harry as his brother once did. The connection between the two mirrors, one grand and ancient, the other broken and secret, formed a subtle bridge across the saga. One cannot overlook how this narrative thread was tragically underdeveloped in the films. The movies never introduced Sirius's two-way mirror, let alone explained the significance of the shard. Aberforth's eye appears, but without context, it becomes a puzzling moment rather than a culmination. The emotional resonance, the idea that even in brokenness there is connection, that memory finds a way to endure, was lost. The symbolic potential of the mirror, spanning from Erised to Aberforth, was severed in cinematic translation. But in the books, the mirror's legacy continued in other forms as well. Harry's journey was always a battle between reality and desire. Time and again, he faced choices that mirrored the lesson Dumbledore taught him before Erised. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Whether it was his obsession with seeing his parents, his longing to remain in Sirius's company, or even the temptation to use the resurrection stone more than once, the theme recurred. The mirror was never just an artifact, it was a warning, a lesson in self-awareness. Even in Dumbledore's own arc, the mirror's philosophy loomed large. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry learns that the wise, powerful headmaster had once sought the resurrection stone himself, driven by his guilt and longing for redemption. Albus, the man who warned Harry against Erised's pull, was not immune to its lure. This duality made the character more human, and in doing so gave the mirror an enduring narrative voice. It had shown Harry a fantasy, but its real power was in the truths it revealed about those who looked too long. Sirius's gift to Harry, a practical mirror meant for communication, also carried symbolic weight. It was a piece of friendship, trust, and foresight. That Harry did not use it until it was too late only heightened its emotional power. When he finally turned to it, desperate, it was not for casual talk, but for salvation. He needed a way back to the ones who once stood by him. And in that moment, the eye that stared back became a silent reply. You are not alone. The idea of broken mirrors and hidden watchers reappears in Rowling's use of reflective surfaces throughout the series. The pensive, another enchanted device, allowed characters to revisit memories, but never to change them. Much like Erised, it reminded us of the danger in lingering too long in what was, or what could have been. Harry's growth is marked by his ability to step away from the past and act in the now. Yet the mirror's lesson remained at the core of that journey. When Harry walks to his death in the Forbidden Forest, guided by the spirits conjured by the resurrection stone, it is a full circle moment. He no longer needs a mirror to see them. They live within him, not as unreachable desires, but as parts of his being. This marks the final triumph over the temptation that Erised once presented. He does not ask for them to stay, nor does he seek to hold on to them. He walks forward, willing to die because he has learned the ultimate lesson. Love is not about clinging, but about letting go. The mirror's arc, then, is completed not through a return to its glass, but through its integration into Harry's character. He becomes the living reflection of its wisdom. Where once he sat before it, night after night, aching to touch his parents, he now carries them within him, not as illusions but as inspiration. The Erised mirror was a relic. Harry became its successor, embodying the same questions but offering different answers. In the Tales of Beedle the Bard, a book deeply tied to the final volume, the theme of desire versus acceptance is repeated in the tale of the Resurrection Stone. The second brother, driven mad by longing for his lost love, mirrors the folly of those who once sat before Erised. Only the third brother, who greeted death as an old friend, understands what it means to live fully. Harry, by the end of the saga, follows that path. It is the culmination of the mirror's teaching. Aberforth Dumbledore, often viewed as a secondary figure, holds the final key to the mirror's story. It is in his pub, the Hog's Head, that Harry finds shelter. It is Aberforth's connection to the past, his quiet mourning, that aligns him with the mirror's deeper meaning. Like Erised, he reflects what was lost, but does not seek to recapture it. He offers help, not illusions, and in that he becomes a living embodiment of the mirror's final evolution, from fantasy to reality, from longing to legacy. There is poetic symmetry in the idea that the mirror's essence re-emerges in fragments, never whole, but always present. Just as memory is never complete, but always lingering, so too is the mirror's story scattered throughout the saga. The physical object may be hidden away in some forgotten Hogwarts chamber, but its spirit walks with Harry into every battle, every loss, and every choice. J.K. Rowling's decision not to bring the mirror back physically may have frustrated some, but it allowed the symbol to mature. Erised was never meant to be a recurring artifact. Its power lay in absence. Its silence forced the characters and the readers to look inward, to carry its lesson without its presence. It became, in essence, a mirror of growth. The films, constrained by time and pacing, chose not to explore this subtle thread, but readers, attentive to the undercurrents, know that the mirror never truly left. In a world filled with spells and battles, it was one of the few magical objects that asked no favors, granted no power, and demanded only honesty. It stripped away armor, leaving the soul exposed, and in doing so it left a mark deeper than any curse. The story of the mirror of Erised after the Philosopher's Stone is one of echoes reflected in broken glass, hidden glances, and quiet grief. Its power did not lie in repeated appearances, but in the way it shaped the emotional architecture of the series. It taught Harry and us that what we desire most is often what we must learn to live without. And in that acceptance, we find strength. In the end, Erised is not a mirror that shows us what we want. It is a mirror that teaches us why we want it. It begins with fantasy but ends with truth. Harry's journey through the 7 books is, in many ways, a walk away from that first reflection step by step, until desire gives way to understanding. And in that quiet transformation, the mirror finds its final, invisible place. Not in a room, not on a wall, but in the hearts of those who have looked and chosen to live. Number 22, the unspoken love triangle, Bill, Fleur, and Tonks. It was in the quiet corners of the story, nestled between battle strategies and enchanted corridors, where the true complexities of the wizarding world revealed themselves, not through duels or dark spells, but through silences, glances, and the aching humanity of the heart. Among these subtleties was a quiet storm, barely mentioned yet deeply telling, the almost invisible emotional triangle between Bill Weasley, Fleur Delacour, and Nymphadora Tonks. It never erupted into scandal or confrontation, yet its echoes can be found in frowns, pauses, and a rare moment of maternal insight from Molly Weasley. The triangle, or rather the shadow of one, stands as a quiet testament to how even witches and wizards aren't immune to the messiness of unspoken feelings. Long before Fleur and Bill became a fixture at the Burrow, Tonks had already begun appearing regularly in the lives of the Weasleys. As a young and vibrant member of the Order of the Phoenix, she spent evenings at Grimmauld Place and took part in important missions, often alongside members of the Weasley family. Bill, the oldest and effortlessly charming, was hard to miss. With his long hair, dragon-hide boots, and casual confidence, he exuded a different kind of charisma, older, more dangerous, and, perhaps most importantly, genuinely kind. It would not have been surprising if Tonks, still navigating her place within the Order and the war, felt a flutter of admiration for him. There is no explicit confession, no direct scene, where Tonks confides in anyone about her feelings for Bill. But literature often speaks in silences, and J.K. Rowling was a master of such subtlety. When Fleur begins to date Bill, Tonks's demeanor shifts dramatically. Her usual bubbly nature fades. She becomes more reserved, distant. Even her appearance, usually full of bright colors and playful transformations, dulls. This change doesn't go unnoticed. Molly Weasley herself comments in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, "Tonks has been odd lately. I suppose she's just upset about Sirius." But as time goes on, that explanation feels increasingly insufficient. The real clue comes in the gradual layering of events. When Tonks's Patronus changes, shifting from its original form to a new one resembling a wolf, it is a sign rolling plants like a seed. A Patronus, after all, reflects one's innermost feelings. Yet even this shift doesn't happen until later. Before her feelings for Remus Lupin solidify, there is a stretch of time where Tonks lingers in emotional limbo. That limbo coincides with the rise of Bill and Fleur's relationship. If one reads between the lines, it's not difficult to suspect that Tonks may have, for a time, harbored feelings for Bill, however quietly or briefly. The contrast between Tonks and Fleur is impossible to ignore. Fleur, dazzling and elegant, a quarter Veela with a presence that commands attention, was initially dismissed by the Weasley women as superficial. Tonks, by comparison, was beloved by the family, clumsy, quirky, but warm and brave. One can imagine the sting Tonks might have felt, seeing someone like Fleur not only win Bill's affections, but also charm her way into the very family Tonks had felt so at home with. It is never said aloud, but the feeling of being replaced, of not being chosen, can be devastating in its quiet cruelty. Molly Weasley's disapproval of Fleur was thinly veiled at first. She offered criticism masked as politeness, subtle barbs hidden in compliments. One could wonder if part of her resistance came from a maternal sense that Tonks might have been a better match, familiar, endearing, and already loved by the family. That thought might have resonated especially hard with Tonks, who had likely grown comfortable in her place among the Weasleys. The arrival of Fleur disrupted a delicate balance. Even without romantic expectations, Tonks might have felt displaced. Remus Lupin, of course, enters this emotional equation, but not immediately. When Tonks finally declares her love for Lupin, it feels sudden, too sudden for someone so deeply affected. In the hospital wing after the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, her words burst forth with desperation. "You see," shouted Tonks, "you see, she still wants to marry him even though he's been bitten. She doesn't care." These lines from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince are loaded with pain, but they are also revealing. Her declaration of love is made in a moment of comparison. She references Bill and Fleur, not herself and Remus. It is as if she is projecting, drawing a parallel to justify her own feelings. Why? Perhaps because she too had once stood silently aside as someone else won the man she might have loved. Lupin, in turn, resists her affection. His arguments are noble, but also cowardly. "I am too old for you, too poor, too dangerous," he says. His self-loathing pushes her away. During that time, Tonks becomes visibly downcast. Her appearance dulls, her spirit falters. Her magic is affected, her Patronus cannot form properly, and her Metamorph Magus abilities falter. Rowling notes these changes explicitly, and while the text attributes it to Lupin's rejection, the timing is curious. These effects start before the full development of her relationship with Remus. That timeline supports the theory that other emotions possibly linked to Bill had begun troubling her earlier. Even more telling is how Tonks reacts to Bill after his mauling by Fenrir Greyback. Fleur stands defiantly beside her fiancé, declaring, "I am good-looking enough for both of us." It is a powerful moment, but it also serves as contrast. Tonks does not have a moment like this for Remus, at least not publicly. Her love, while fierce, is mostly hidden, mostly suppressed. With Bill, she never had the chance to express anything at all, and in that silence lies the ache of what might have been. There is no rivalry between Fleur and Tonks. That is perhaps the most fascinating part. There are no harsh words, no scenes of tension. The triangle, if it exists, is one-sided and quiet. But sometimes the absence of conflict says more than its presence. Tonks never tried to compete with Fleur. She simply faded into the background, her colours dimmed, her energy sapped. In some ways it was more tragic than a fight could ever be. The films, of course, erased this delicate emotional layering. Tonks appears infrequently and without depth. Her relationship with Lupin is condensed into background moments. Bill and Fleur's relationship, meanwhile, is largely off-screen. The entire subplot of Tonks's emotional struggles is sacrificed for time. As a result, a key piece of her humanity is lost. The Tonks of the books is messy, emotional, deeply human. She feels rejection, heartbreak, and longing, and fights through it anyway. It is also worth remembering that Tonks's arc is not about who she loves, but how she loves. Her affection for Lupin, and possibly for Bill, comes from places of admiration, vulnerability, and deep emotional connection. She does not pursue love for status or security. Her heart is not strategic. It simply reaches toward those she respects, even when it costs her. Bill, for his part, seems unaware of any potential feelings Tonks might have harbored. There is no evidence he led her on or treated her unkindly, but the cruelty of unrequited affection lies not in intentional rejection, but in the innocent blindness of the desired. Bill was simply himself, brave, warm, and quietly heroic. That may have been enough. The triangle never explodes because it was never fully formed. Fleur and Bill marry. Tonks and Remus eventually find their way to each other, but the quiet months in between are filled with invisible fractures, small sorrows, and moments of almost love. These are not the grand romances that shape history, but the ones that shape character. They are the ghosts of feelings never spoken, never fully acknowledged, yet impossible to ignore. In a world of prophecy, war, and dark magic, it is easy to overlook such personal tremors. But Rowling knew that human stories are often made in the margins. The heartbreak Tonks experiences gives depth to her courage. Her ability to love, even while enduring rejection, makes her bravery feel earned. And it is in that quiet suffering that her character shines most. It also makes her final moments all the more devastating. Tonks and Remus die at the Battle of Hogwarts, leaving behind their infant son. They die having finally found each other, but not without scars. Their love, forged through rejection, fear, and societal disapproval, is hard-won. But what remains unspoken is that Tonks's journey to that love was not a straight line. It may have passed through admiration for Bill. It may have faltered in the shadow of Fleur's luminous presence. And that detour, though quiet, is part of her truth. As readers, we are left to connect these dots ourselves. Rowling never confirms these interpretations outright, but she leaves clues like breadcrumbs, the change in Patronus, the sudden mood shifts, the way Tonks withdraws after Bill begins dating Fleur. These details may be small, but they matter. They remind us that even in a magical world, the heart follows its own quiet logic. Perhaps the most striking part of this story is its restraint. There are no confessions, no betrayals, no dramatic showdowns, just a girl who turned quiet, and a boy who never noticed, and another who finally did. Number 23, Stan Shunpike and the Fear-Driven Ministry. Of all the minor characters in the Harry Potter saga, few hold a mirror to the failures of a crumbling magical government quite like Stan Shunpike. Introduced with an air of comic relief in The Prisoner of Azkaban, Stan was the bumbling but enthusiastic conductor of the night bus, proudly announcing arrivals and fare prices in his thick Cockney accent. Yet by the time the events of the Half-Blood Prince unfold, this cheerful young man has become a tragic symbol of systemic injustice. His arrest and imprisonment by the Ministry of Magic serve as a chilling example of what happens when institutions operate not on truth or justice, but on fear. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the wizarding world is unraveling. The return of Lord Voldemort has thrown the Ministry into chaos. Instead of acknowledging its past failings, its stubborn refusal to believe Harry and Dumbledore when Voldemort first returned, the Ministry chooses to act quickly and loudly. It needs to be seen as taking action, as defending the public, as in control. But this control is an illusion, and behind the illusion is panic. One of their first high-profile arrests is Stan Shunpike. The public learns through the Daily Prophet that a Death Eater has been captured. There is no trial, no clear evidence, no admission of proof, only the desperate assertion that the Ministry is doing something. Harry, upon hearing this, is livid. During a heated conversation with Rufus Scrimgeour in The Half-Blood Prince, he confronts the minister directly. "You're trying to make Stan Shunpike a scapegoat just like you did with me." The accusation cuts deep. Scrimgeour doesn't deny it. He justifies the arrest by saying, "These are dangerous times, and the wizarding community demands reassurance. We have to show that we are doing something." The line is haunting. It reveals that reassurance, not truth, is the Ministry's priority. The Ministry has transformed into a theatre where justice is a stage play performed for a frightened audience. What makes Stan's case so harrowing is his sheer unlikeliness as a villain. He is neither powerful nor cunning. He was barely out of school. His most remarkable quality was his enthusiasm for public transportation. To imagine him serving Voldemort stretches belief beyond recognition, but to a fearful bureaucracy desperate for control, logic no longer matters. Guilt is irrelevant. All that matters is optics. The Ministry arrests Stan not because he is dangerous, but because he is expendable. By the time we reach Deathly Hallows, Stan's situation becomes even darker. Harry, Ron, and Hermione spot him during their escape from Privet Drive. He is flying among the Death Eaters. Yet something is wrong. His eyes are glassy. He is silent. The narration makes it clear he is under the imperious curse. Stan Shunpike, already scapegoated by the Ministry, has now become a puppet of Voldemort. The irony is devastating. The boy they arrested to demonstrate action is now genuinely being used by the enemy. The Ministry's fear created the very threat it was pretending to contain. This is not just a fictional tragedy. Through Stan, J.K. Rowling explores a profound truth about the real world. History is littered with governments that, when cornered by fear, resort to the persecution of the weak. The Red Scare in the United States, the purges of Stalin's Soviet Union, witch hunts in every era. In all these cases, authorities seized people not because of what they did, but because arresting someone, anyone, gave the illusion of order. In Deathly Hallows, this theme expands. The Ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming. The collapse is complete, but it began with Stan, with fear dressed as justice. There's a haunting moment in Half-Blood Prince when Harry reflects on this madness. He reads in the Prophet that Stan is still imprisoned and thinks to himself, what's the point in arresting someone if they're innocent? It is a childlike question, but also the most adult one. The system has inverted itself. Innocence no longer protects you, it condemns you. For in a world where fear rules, innocence is indistinguishable from guilt. Arrests are no longer a result of investigation, but an act of political choreography. Stan's arrest also serves another narrative function. It alienates Harry from the Ministry. Until then, he had hoped, however reluctantly, that the institution might find its moral compass. But when Scrimgeour justifies Stan's imprisonment as necessary, Harry refuses to comply. He walks away from the minister's handshake, a symbolic gesture that echoes Dumbledore's lessons about doing what is right, not what is easy. Through this decision, Harry begins to shed the last traces of his boyhood trust in authority. He understands that systems, even magical ones, are fallible and sometimes dangerous. There is something deeply personal in how Rowling crafts Stan's downfall. She does not give him a heroic death or a redemptive arc. He simply disappears into the machinery of a broken system. We do not know what happens to him after the war. He fades from the narrative, like so many real-world victims of injustice. His purpose is not to be a hero. His purpose is to be a wound that never heals. A reminder, a cautionary tale. He is the everyman crushed under a system too afraid to admit its own weakness. What makes Stan's story even more powerful is how quietly it is told. Rowling doesn't use it as a central plot point. She doesn't hammer the message. It's in the background, like a whisper you can't ignore. This subtlety gives the story its strength. Readers who pay attention are rewarded with a deeper understanding of how Voldemort's rise was enabled, not just by the Death Eaters, but by the fearful compliance of ordinary people and institutions. The Ministry didn't fall because it was conquered. It fell because it surrendered. The films, unfortunately, strip away this richness. Stan's arrest is never shown. His role in the escape from Privet Drive is glossed over. The implications of a government abusing its power are buried beneath action sequences and visual effects. This omission is not just a narrative loss, it is a moral one. Without Stan, the films fail to show how Voldemort wins not just through violence, but through fear, and how fear makes monsters out of bureaucrats. When we think of the villains in Harry Potter, names like Bellatrix Lestrange and Lucius Malfoy come to mind. But what about the quiet villainy of officials signing unjust decrees? The cold detachment of someone like Dolores Umbridge, who smiled as she tortured students in the name of law and order? Stan's imprisonment belongs in that same world. It is the evil of indifference, of choosing comfort over courage, of prioritizing control over conscience. One of the most revealing scenes occurs when Lupin defends Stan's innocence, saying, "The Ministry is imprisoning people without trials, just to show they're making an effort." That single line encapsulates the disease at the heart of the system. It is no longer about good or evil. It's about performance, about maintaining the illusion that the Ministry is strong, when in truth it is rotting from within. And like all such illusions, it requires sacrifices. Stan was one of the first. The idea that fear drives injustice is not unique to Rowling, but her inclusion of it in a children's book is remarkable. She could have created a binary world, good versus evil, light versus dark. Instead, she gives us Stan Shunpike, a reminder that evil often wears a badge, that oppression can come with paperwork, that the true test of a society is not how it treats the powerful, but how it treats the powerless. Throughout Deathly Hallows, Harry wrestles with these complexities. As he sees the Ministry fall, as he watches the persecution of Muggle-borns and the silence of those who know better, he begins to understand what Dumbledore had tried to teach him. The enemy is not just Voldemort, it is also the culture of fear that lets Voldemort in. Stan's arrest is the first crack in the dam. It foretells the flood to come. There is no justice in Stan's imprisonment, no closure. And that's the point. Rowling leaves the thread hanging because that is how the world works. Not all wrongs are righted, not all stories have neat endings. Sometimes the innocent suffer and the world moves on. But readers, remember, Stan's story lingers because it is not fantasy, it is truth in a magical disguise. As readers, we might ask ourselves what we would have done. Would we have spoken up for Stan? Or would we have nodded, whispered, "Well, better safe than sorry," and gone on with our day? Rowling forces us to confront that question, not with spectacle, but with quiet tragedy. Stan Shunpike is not a warrior or a rebel. He is just a boy with a ticket book caught in the gears of fear. In the end, Stan's story is not about heroism. It's about failure, of government, of community, of morality. It is a reminder that fear, left unchecked, is more dangerous than any dark wizard. It corrodes truth, it silences reason, and worst of all, it convinces good people to do nothing. That, more than any spell or curse, is the true magic of tyranny. And that is why we must remember Stan, not because he changed the world, but because the world changed him, and never looked back. Number 24, Buckbeak's Trial and Injustice in the Magical World. Of all the magical creatures to grace the pages of Harry Potter, Buckbeak the Hippogriff stands as a symbol of misunderstood nobility, both powerful and gentle, proud yet vulnerable. His fate is more than a subplot. It is a moral crossroad in The Prisoner of Azkaban, highlighting themes of institutional injustice, personal responsibility, and the subtle cruelty of prejudice. The movies offer only a fleeting glimpse of this tale, but J.K. Rowling's novel invites us into the shadows of a courtroom where more than just a beast's life is on trial. Buckbeak's story begins with an innocent display. During Hagrid's first care of magical creatures class, the half-giant beams with pride as he introduces the hippogriffs to his students. Among them, Buckbeak gleams like polished slate, with storm-grey feathers and a beak sharp enough to pierce steel. You've got to show them respect, Hagrid instructs, and Harry Potter, curious and open-hearted, offers Buckbeak a courteous bow. The creature bows in return and their connection is sealed. Harry climbs atop him, soaring above the forbidden forest, wind in his hair, awe in his chest. It is a moment of trust and of magic, unfiltered. But the mood darkens with the arrival of Draco Malfoy. Arrogant and mocking, Draco refuses to bow. Instead, he provokes Buckbeak with jeers and disdain, treating the majestic beast as a circus sideshow. Buckbeak retaliates, slashing Draco's arm, a wound more superficial than serious, yet the incident spirals. "This is your fault," Lucius Malfoy later snarls, not to Draco, but to Hagrid, and by proxy, Buckbeak. The power of pure blood privilege begins to unfurl its cold grip. Lucius does not simply want punishment, he wants to make an example. Hagrid is a half-giant, Buckbeak is a beast. To Lucius, both are expendable. The Ministry of Magic responds with swift bureaucracy masked as justice. A hearing is scheduled. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, ominously named, is to decide Buckbeak's fate. The wording alone implies guilt before innocence. Hagrid, distraught, begins to prepare his case, but the cards are stacked against him. The wizarding legal system, bloated with procedure and prejudice, isn't built to defend magical creatures. It is a system designed to protect itself, to appear fair while preserving the power of the elite. The courtroom becomes a battleground. Hagrid, normally shy and inarticulate, tries to defend Buckbeak with trembling sincerity. Yet Lucius Malfoy, dressed in tailored black robes, moves like a serpent through the chamber, whispering into ears, casting shadows with words alone. His influence is not official, but it is palpable. Everyone knows who he is. They know what he represents, and so, when the verdict arrives, it feels inevitable. Buckbeak is to be executed. For Hagrid, the decision is devastating. He returns to his hut weeping, drowning his sorrow in fire whiskey. "They're going to kill him," he sobs. For all his sighs, Hagrid's heart breaks like glass. Buckbeak's scheduled execution becomes a looming storm cloud over Hogwarts, darkening every corridor, infecting every breath. And yet not everyone accepts the ruling as final. Hermione Granger, ever the crusader for justice, begins to investigate legal loopholes. "I found something in 15th century charms and counter-curses," she tells Harry, her voice urgent. But the Ministry is unmoved. The system refuses to bend. It is at this moment that Rowling pivots the narrative. She doesn't turn to further arguments or appeals. Instead, she invokes magic, not just as a tool of fantasy, but as a metaphor for change outside the confines of law. Time travel enters as the last resort. Professor Dumbledore, cryptic but knowing, subtly grants Hermione permission to use her time turner. The plan is delicate: save Buckbeak before the executioner swings his axe and ensure no one notices. It is not merely a rescue, it is a rebellion. The Ministry's decision is circumvented not through legal debate, but through clever resistance. It is a quiet, elegant defiance of authority. That night, hidden in the shadows of Hagrid's pumpkin patch, Hermione and Harry watch as the executioner McNair prepares to swing. McNair is no neutral party. He is a former Death Eater who now kills creatures for the Ministry. The irony is acidic, and yet, thanks to the time-turner's loop, Buckbeak vanishes before the blade can fall. A thud is heard. A pumpkin is shattered. Justice, true justice, flutters away on hippogriff wings. This rescue isn't just dramatic, it is layered with symbolism. Buckbeak's salvation is not granted by authority, but taken through courage and cleverness. In a world where laws are often instruments of control, Rowling suggests that real justice may require bending time and rules. Buckbeak, flying free with Sirius Black clinging to his back, becomes an image of liberation from the forces that wish to silence or cage those they do not understand. What makes this story resonate so deeply is that it mirrors real-world struggles. Buckbeak is the voiceless defendant. His fate is determined not by evidence but by who speaks louder, who wields more influence. The legal system fails him because it was never built for his protection. Hagrid's bumbling defense, though heartfelt, is crushed beneath the machinery of wealth and prejudice. The trial is not a search for truth, but a performance. Lucius Malfoy, as ever, is the puppet master behind the scenes. He doesn't raise his wand, but his words carry weight like curses. He manipulates perception, exploits fear, and leans on old alliances. He is what injustice looks like in tailored robes, a man who uses rules not as boundaries, but as weapons. My son was attacked, he reminds everyone, ignoring that Draco's arrogance and recklessness sparked the event. It is not facts that matter in Buckbeak's trial, but narratives, and Lucius knows how to shape them. The emotional stakes are most visible through Hagrid. He is not merely Buckbeak's caretaker, he is a proxy for all who are misunderstood, underestimated, and dismissed. His grief is raw, his despair unpolished. He is not a trained lawyer, he has no pedigree, and so, even though his love for Buckbeak is pure, it is not enough in a court built to dismiss voices like his. Rowling uses Hagrid to make a quiet but firm indictment of systemic bias. When Harry and Hermione intervene, it is a turning point, not just in the plot, but in moral clarity. They do not trust the system, they act. Their decision to use the time turner is more than a plot device, it is an act of moral agency. It shows the reader that sometimes doing the right thing means disobeying flawed structures. In saving Buckbeak, they affirm that justice must be felt, not just declared. It is important to note that this storyline, rich in tension and message, was dramatically shortened in the film adaptation. The movie shows Buckbeak's flight, but not the weight behind it. The courtroom scene, the manipulations of Lucius, the desperation of Hagrid, all are reduced to moments rather than arcs. The emotional resonance of the trial, the helplessness felt by those who cared, is diluted. The film offers action, the book offers consequence. Rowling's prose during these moments is deliberate. When Harry sees the executioner swing from afar, she writes, "He saw the axe rise and fall and heard a sickening thud. It is not Buckbeak who dies, but the imagery is powerful, the sound is real, the fear is real, and the stakes are never clearer. It is this balance of magical realism and grim reality that gives Buckbeak's trial its narrative gravity." Sirius Black's eventual escape on Buckbeak's back ties the two stories together, creature and man, both hunted, both unfairly condemned. That flight, brief and silent, speaks volumes. It tells the reader that the world is not always fair, but hope lives in rebellion. It's no coincidence that Sirius and Buckbeak vanish into the night together. They are fugitives, yes, but also survivors of a system that tried to erase them. Ultimately, Buckbeak's story is not just about a magical creature. It is about what happens when the powerful decide who is worthy of mercy and who is not. It is about fighting for those who cannot speak, those who are silenced not by their guilt, but by their difference. Rowling doesn't romanticize the struggle. She paints it in tears and trembling hands, in loopholes and last chances, and in doing so she reminds the reader that justice is not something given, it is something earned, and sometimes stolen. In a world filled with dragons and dementors, Buckbeak's tale might seem small, but it is precisely its intimacy that makes it powerful. It asks readers to look beyond the spectacle and see the systems that determine fate, and it urges them in quiet, firm prose to bow before dignity and to fight for it when it is under threat. Number 25. The Carrows and the Occupation of Hogwarts. When the Ministry of Magic fell into the hands of Voldemort and his Death Eaters, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, once a place of wonder, learning, and safety, was twisted into a dark, oppressive fortress. While the films skim over the transformation, the books reveal a much starker picture. The ancient castle, with its talking portraits and enchanted staircases, now echoed with screams, silence, and fear. A pair of names came to haunt the corridors, Alecto and Amicus Carrow. The Carrow siblings weren't just Death Eaters, they were enforcers of Voldemort's regime. Hogwarts was placed under their watchful, merciless eyes, with Amicus appointed as the new dark arts teacher, a subject that had always been controversial but never openly embraced until now. Alecto, meanwhile, taught Muggle studies, though the course had mutated into a series of propaganda lessons on the inferiority of Muggles. This perversion of education was not just sinister, it was calculated, it was indoctrination through terror. What made the Carrows different from previous antagonists at Hogwarts was their brutality. They didn't merely teach, they punished. Students who disobeyed or even hesitated were tortured. Amicus, sneering and cruel, relished the use of the Cruciatus curse. But the true horror was how students were forced to participate. They were commanded to use unforgivable curses on each other. "We have to learn it," Amicus sneered, "so we can use it properly on enemies of the new order." Neville Longbottom, once the shy boy who had trouble remembering passwords and performing simple spells, emerged as an unexpected symbol of defiance. It began gradually, small acts of resistance, protecting younger students, speaking up during lessons. But as the Carrows tightened their grip, Neville grew bolder. When Ginny Weasley and Luna Lovegood were forced into hiding or taken away, Neville stayed behind. The boy who once feared his own shadow began leading the resistance. Neville's transformation was not just physical, it was spiritual. He bore bruises, cuts and broken bones, but he never bent. The Carrows noticed. They tried to break him, but he refused. They tried to intimidate him, and he smiled through bloodied lips. "They've used the Cruciatus curse on me," he told Harry later in the book, "and they don't scare me anymore." The Neville who emerged during that year was a warrior forged in silence and shadow. He revived Dumbledore's army, not as a student club, but as an underground rebellion. The Room of Requirement, ever adaptive, became a sanctuary for the hunted. It provided beds, food, and light in the darkness. Seamus Finnegan, Michael Corner, Terry Boot, and others joined Neville. Together they created a network of resistance within the heart of the occupied school. The room protected them, even as the Carrows hunted them. The Room of Requirement's role in the saga deepened here. It was no longer just a magical space for forgotten textbooks or secret duels. It became a haven for the broken, a temple for the brave. The students slept on conjured hammocks and dined on stolen or conjured food. Portraits within the castle, loyal to Dumbledore, helped smuggle supplies and news. Even Aberforth Dumbledore, the gruff barman of the Hog's Head, aided them through a hidden tunnel behind a portrait of Ariana. Inside the walls of this hidden refuge, new heroes were born. Dean Thomas, on the run and unable to prove his blood status, found a place among them. Lavender Brown, Parvati Patil, and Ernie Macmillan each played roles in protecting and nurturing the younger students. The DA was no longer practicing spells, it was surviving tyranny. And the cost was high. Every venture outside the room carried risk. Every act of rebellion could mean torture. The Carrows used cruel tactics to enforce discipline. Students were made examples of. Detentions no longer involved writing lines, they involved whips and hexes. When Michael Corner was caught passing a note, he was suspended by his ankles in the dungeons for 2 nights. Seamus was beaten for refusing to praise Voldemort. "We were all used to seeing blood," he later confessed. The line between school and prison vanished. The Forbidden Forest, once a place of mystery and mischief, became a place of exile. Students who angered the Carrows were sent into the forest as punishment. There they encountered not only dangerous creatures, but also Hagrid, who did what he could to keep them safe. Yet even he was no longer untouchable. His hut was burned. He was driven underground, like so many others who dared to defy the regime. Neville bore the worst of it. Once, after helping a first-year escape a punishment, he was chained in the Great Hall for hours, a spectacle of defiance and suffering, but it only increased his legend. The younger students looked at him with awe. He never asked for this, he never craved attention, but he became the beating heart of Hogwarts resistance. He kept their hope alive when everything else crumbled. One night, Amicus tried to force Neville to torture a fellow student. When Neville refused, Amicus struck him, again and again, but Neville's wand remained raised. "Do it!" Amicus growled, "or I'll do worse." Neville spat in his face. That was when the Carrows stopped trying to turn him and started trying to destroy him. But by then, it was too late. The idea of rebellion had already taken root. The books make it clear Hogwarts was under siege. The grand halls and moving staircases were no longer symbols of magic, but of control. The Great Hall, once a place of feasts and laughter, echoed with silence and dread. Students whispered in corners, afraid of informants. Prefects aligned with the Death Eaters. Even Filch grew darker, dragging chains and aiding the Carrows. Minerva McGonagall, though still at Hogwarts, was powerless, at least on the surface. She walked a tightrope of compliance and protection. She shielded students when she could, but her position was precarious. If she opposed the Carrows openly, they'd remove her, or worse. But she remained a quiet force of dignity in a crumbling world, waiting for the moment when she could act. It wasn't just physical violence that haunted Hogwarts, it was psychological warfare. Alecto taught students that Muggles were animals. She forced them to repeat lies. Those who resisted were punished. It was a rewriting of truth, an attempt to poison minds. Some students began to believe the lies, others stayed silent to survive, but a few, like Neville and his allies, chose to fight back. The books describe the fear with haunting clarity. It was like being trapped in a nightmare, Seamus told Harry when he returned. The students had become prisoners in their own school. The teachers were either collaborators or captives, and yet the flame of resistance never died. It flickered in every act of defiance, in every stolen meal, every whispered plan, every spell cast in secret. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione returned to Hogwarts in the final book, they did not find the same school. They found a battlefield in waiting. The students were armed. The room of requirement had become a fortress, and Neville stood tall, scarred, and unbroken. "You're not alone," he told them. And he wasn't. The school had changed, but its spirit had not been conquered. The battle that followed, the Battle of Hogwarts, was the culmination of everything that year had built. It was not just Harry's fight. It was Neville's, it was Ginny's, it was Luna's, it was Seamus's and Dean's, and the hundreds of nameless students who endured fear and chose courage. It was the final breath of rebellion forged in the ashes of pain. The Carrows were defeated not just with magic, but with memory. The students remembered everything, every curse, every bruise, every friend lost or broken. And when the moment came, they rose, not just for Harry, but for themselves, for the school that had given them strength, for the room that had given them shelter, for the teachers who protected them, and the friends who never came back. The films, while powerful, couldn't capture the depth of this transformation. They showed glimpses, Neville's bravery, the battle, the fire, but they missed the quiet months of hunger and hurt, the moments when children became warriors, when spells became lifelines, when Hogwarts, once a sanctuary, became a crucible. Neville Longbottom's story is not a side plot. It is a central arc of resistance. He became what Dumbledore always hoped for, not the chosen one, but the necessary one. "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies," Dumbledore once said, "but just as much to stand up to our friends." Neville stood up to both, and in doing so, he stood for all of us.